Hello and welcome to the Authority of Love. I'm your co-host Greg Williams, joined by our other co-host, Mr. David Walls of the Family Foundation for Family Foundation Friday. Thanks to those who have been reaching out to encourage us, and we appreciate that, talking about the issues that we're covering and how we're doing. David, thanks for your expertise on that. We appreciate that. And we've got some more today, but before we do that, you're going to have to watch the video to see this, but we're now in the meteorological summer, right? So we've got our light-colored shirts on, and again, have to watch the video to catch that. But I know you're deep in summer already because you got to leave right from here and go to a summer event that most churches have, right?
Yeah, VBS. Kids are having a blast. Love VBS.
Yeah. And you've already got the patent warning from your wife, don't be late,
yes,
right?
That's right.
Kids,
That's
we all get those,
right?
right? And I know you won't be. We're going to get through this, and we thank you, David, for taking the time to do this. Last week, David, we talked a lot about Memorial Day, and in particular, Walmart's response to that. Instead of honoring those who had given their lives, I don't know whether they did that or not, but they took advantage of that time and had sales and all kinds of other promotions that jumped on this whole thing called Pride Month.
Yeah.
And not only those, but I know the DOE has jumped on that as well, Department of Education.
Well, yeah.
That, right?
Well, we're in, the media kickoff, the promotion in the culture, the propaganda is in full swing.
Yes.
As we are, in the month of June, unfortunately, and it's really been, continues to be very problematic to see the way in which a lot of governments, particularly the federal government under the Biden administration, is continuing to push LGBTQ agenda, harmful policies, both through executive order and some of these proposed rules that you know I've talked about, but even the promotion through the Department of Education, the continued weaponization of indoctrination as it relates to the education establishment at the federal level, very concerning. But look, as believers, we just need to remember, and we do our weekly prayer devotional, and we talked about this month, and reminding folks of Proverbs. It says that pride goes before destruction, and a haughty spirit is before the fall. And this really is a time in which our culture is promoting, or some in our culture, promoting and celebrating what ultimately is what God calls sin.
Yes.
And just a reminder for all of us, obviously, to think biblically, to think carefully about what we're allowing our kids to watch and engage in, because this is increasingly popping up in shows and on different streaming devices. They promote this in a lot of different ways, exactly, trying to grab children into this, promote this into young people. The other thing, Greg, is it has a lot of implications continued in the public policy debates that we're having and that you and I are talking about. But we have an opportunity as Christians in this culture to use this month to remind people of the basic biblical truths and realities, that God's the one who designed sexuality. God's the one that creates us as male and female. Yes. And we can use this time to point people back to God's good design.
Yeah, and the specific purpose for that was marriage and family. I mean, he even says this, for this reason. Perhaps three of the most profound words in all of Scripture, if you think about what we're dealing with in our culture today. For this reason. Go check that out in Genesis and in Matthew 19, because Jesus repeated it. I have to piggyback on what you just said, David, because talking about the ads and the cartoons and all the things, the promotions and all of that, you talked about government, you talked about education, you talked about media. Three of the biggest influencers in our culture today. And here we have the church sitting back, and so many of them are either confused or deceived to think that this small percentage of people, which we must love. Yeah. We're called to love. It's not an option. We're called to love. But to condone or think that because we don't agree with them, we're not being compassionate, that's a whole lot of what's going on. It's not just, as one conservative journal has called June, Child Grooming Month. They literally groom everyone, even many Christians, to think, if you don't agree with us, you're not being compassionate. How are you being like Jesus? Yeah. But that's not the truth.
Right.
That's not the truth. And speaking of that, we have something that's coming up in November that may help with at least one of those. And I think if it helps in this one, it helps in the others as well. Speak to us about Yes on 2.
Yeah. So this week, and actually, Greg, I was able to bring my whole family up to the Capitol, which was a lot of fun. But there was a kind of a bill signing, a ceremonial bill signing for the proposed constitutional amendment that'll be on the ballot related to educational choice and
Who signed
choice.
that?
So the Secretary of State was the one that signed that bill. We've talked a little bit about this, but a proposed amendment has to pass with a constitutional majority in the legislature. So this certainly did that, and so therefore the governor doesn't really have the ability to sign or veto that bill, and so the Secretary of State. And so it will. There's still. I talked to the Secretary of State just briefly. They still are certifying some of the primary election results, but after that. We know that this will be the second constitutional amendment that will be on the ballot for voters in Kentucky.
And that's important. Why? Tell them why they need to know that there's 2 of them and what to do with that.
Yeah, well, because if it's similar to the way they've been previously, they'll be at the very end of the ballot, and you want to make sure you make your way all the way to the end of the ballot.
And there'll be a lot of confusing ads out there.
Oh, for sure.
Right?
Yeah. And so let's just talk a little bit. I know, Greg, you and I have discussed this a little bit through some of the past programs. But what does this proposed educational choice amendment do? And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to read the language to let folks know. This is essentially what's going to be on the ballot on November 5th. This is the ballot question that voters will be asked, do you want to support this and add to the Constitution or not? And it says to give parents choices in educational opportunities for their children. Are you in favor of enabling the General Assembly to provide financial support for the education costs of students in kindergarten through 12th grade who are outside of the system of common public schools by amending the Kentucky Constitution as stated below, and then a simple amendment to the Kentucky Constitution? So what does that mean? It's pretty simple and straightforward, but it simply would allow the General Assembly to set up school choice programs,
to give
options to any student, whether they're in the public school system now, whether they're taking advantage of if they're doing homeschooling or private school. It doesn't prescribe any specific school choice program. There's a lot of different options that are out there that many states are moving forward on full steam ahead. As we've talked about, Kentucky is the only state in our region of the nation that doesn't have some kind of school choice program that's in operation right now, and we're really getting left behind because of that.
And we talk about being progressive. This would definitely be a progressive move to give children and parents together the ability to progress in their education, because the results are awesome across the board.
It's a benefit for kids. These school choice programs, particularly some of the ones that are moving forward with universal style programs, that it's a benefit to kids that are in the public school system. It's a huge benefit to teachers, because it opens up a marketplace for more educational opportunities, and teachers flourish in that because we're so thankful for teachers that serve in our public school system and in private. But what it means is there's going to be more educational opportunities and job opportunities for teachers to match their calling in teaching with a circumstance that may align with their values or the time commitment that they have.
True choice.
True choice.
Really true choice, not only for the kids and the parents, but teachers will have more choices. And Kentucky then is supporting and saying, we're not going to streamline this and say you have to be in a public school teaching and making sure that kids do this. By the way, our test results are not that great. And every place that this has happened, the test results have gone up. And my comment to you earlier in introducing this was, if we get education moving in this direction, which is what I think the left fears greatly, then we begin to raise up young people into young adults that begin to move government and media in this direction. There's more freedom, so they can choose and follow through on that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. But here's one of the interesting things. And, we really, I hope that as we move forward in this, this is a bipartisan issue.
Yeah.
I mean, school choice has been a bipartisan issue.
If it's truly looked at objectively,
I mean,
yes.
in urban areas, in rural areas, you've seen a coming together of Republicans and Democrats on this issue.
Yeah.
And now I know our governor has already been kind of trying to turn this into a partisan issue.
Yeah.
But here's a couple of things that look, everyone needs to understand. One, this amendment language does not take a single dollar away from the public school system. You're going to hear that drumbeat over and over and over. It's just not true. All it will allow is for potentially for more investments from the General Assembly, because it will have less constraints on it in terms of how it wants to design a system to fund education, which we fundamentally believe the more you empower parents and allow resources to follow families, parents are the ones that make the best decisions on behalf of our children. That's not a partisan issue, Greg. Republicans and Democrats both realize parents, the families of Kentuckians know that putting parents in the driver's seat is a win-win.
Yes.
It's a win for the public school system when that happens. It's a win for every educational opportunity. So we'll have an opportunity as this progresses to share, but there's just some important things. This is about ensuring that parents and students have more choices, that families are valued in terms of making a decision on what's best for their own children. This is not an attack on the public school system. Right. This is something that, as you said, in states that have implemented broad school choice, it benefits the public school system. Yeah. It benefits kids that are in public school. We all recognize that we are always going to have a robust, common public school system here in Kentucky, as they continue to have in other states, that most families are probably going to be the primary option for them. Right.
But it will elevate.
But we want to see them flourish. We want to see kids, no matter whatever their parents decide is the best educational option for that kid. We want to see them flourish. And so I'm excited about what this would mean here in Kentucky.
Well, let me add something to that. Yeah. We also, and if we're being honest with ourselves, conservative or liberal, however you want to play that, we really don't want to then force our views on others. That's what people say we're doing all the time. Yeah. The modern day, let's say the present day education system does that. Yeah. And because it's government driven in public school, it does that. And so don't force our values on us if you don't want to vote for this, because that's what you're doing. Yeah. This gives the option back. It helps, and as we've said before, it raises every level. Yeah,
and one of the other big ones you should see in the Governor Beshear has already tried to kind of say this is, this is just going to mean that this is just for wealthy kids.
It's exactly the opposite.
It's exactly the opposite. I mean, the children that have benefited, the students that have benefited the most in states that have this, have been on lower income. They're some of the first that benefit from these kinds of programs. But we want to see ultimately, I'd love to see a universal program where there's choice and opportunity for any student, regardless of their socioeconomic background, regardless of whether they live in Louisville or Lexington or Hazard or Paducah, any part of the state.
Yeah. And the parents get the right and the opportunity to choose that and help guide them in that. Yeah. That's a beauty. David, tell them about the Citizen and a little bit more. Show them that if you're on the video.
So in our latest Citizen, and we plug this, but folks can sign up at KentuckyFamily.org and read. But Martin Cothran, our senior policy advisor, has a great piece on the school choice amendment. We have the ballot language in there. And then I'll just also plug, there's been a website that's been launched, KentuckyStudents.org. KentuckyStudents.org. That's going to be a central point that's going to have a lot of information about the amendment, and folks can visit that website right now.
Excellent. KentuckyFamily.org. As always, you can find out more or contact David. LoveandLordship.com. Find out more about our ministry. Thank you for joining us. Thanks for your prayers. Thanks always to the Lord. Make it a great day, and God bless in Christ. Stay tuned at 12:45 for my friend Greg Horn. Hope is here. I'm Greg Williams, and you're listening to The Authority of Love.